Hey, it's Dominic D'Angelo, or is it? Or am I AI? What am I? Do I know who I am? I do. I am Dominic D'Angelo of adfreeshows.com, SEScoops.com, and brassringmedia.com. Check it out. Clearly, I'm flying solo today, so no Robert Karplus. He will be back on Wednesday to talk about AEW Dynamite and all that has unfolded in pro wrestling over this weekend and what's to come. But wow, we got quite the table of topics to talk about. But first, before we do that, let's say hi to some folks in the chat. Triple E, per usual, says, "What's up? What's up, Triple E? Check it out. How's it going?" Wrestling Old Dad says, "Good morning, good after morning, R&I. WrestleDream ended in a nightmare, and tonight's Raw is the start of the Bronze Age." Ooh, I like it. Jeff Henninger says, "Hello, R&I. I'm guessing today's episode will be all about Corey Graves' return to SmackDown." Let me say this. I'll touch upon SmackDown a little bit here on this episode, but Vic Joseph and Corey Graves, they're really good together. Corey Graves is great. I may have a little bias because we're both from Pittsburgh, but I really like Corey Graves. He's awesome. Like, he can play the heel. He can play, give so much added context and nuance to storylines and situations. I think that was no better highlighted than that match between Ilya Dragunov and Sami Zayn. But so yeah, I'm a big fan of Corey Graves. Big fan. Big fan of Vic Joseph too. Pretty wild. Cleveland and Pittsburgh existing together. That's pretty wild. Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria. Dre Owen says, "Hello on our eye. WWE using AI to do storylines." Actually, thank you for bringing this up, Dre. I did want to talk about that, and I forgot to talk about that. And that's what prompted me to do the intro, was reading your comment. Triple E says, "How Razor don't think he was done any run-ins lately, or I was too stoned to notice." Oh, how come Razor hasn't done any run-ins? He's lurking around right now. He is. He's literally like right here looking at stuff. So he's up to no good right now. Scumbag Trav, like the name. Happy Monday, gents. Glad I made it live. Glad you made it live too, man. Happy to be here. Triple E says, "Is Marcus D'Angelo in his Halloween?" It's Marcus D'Angelo in his Halloween costume. I did think for a bit they were really going to have Ilya lose on his night back. Yeah, that probably would have been a good move. Corey Graves' brother in an MIA in AAA. Interesting. Sam Adonis. Sam Adonis is great too. Devin Delling just pops in too. Hey, yo, what's up? I'll tell you what's up. A lot of interesting wrestling this weekend. A lot of takes from the weekend as well. Not just from WrestleDream, but I will say SmackDown. Now, SmackDown, I don't tune in live. I've caught matches after the fact. And me picking and choosing what to watch throughout the show, I have to say SmackDown feels like a really noteworthy show week in and week out on a consistent basis. I think it's presence of Cody Rhodes being there. But there's a lot of T's crossed and I's dotted when it comes to that program, I think, in regards to who they're focusing on and what is intriguing. Obviously, the Sami Zayn Open Challenge is really, really cool. And the setup to that this past Friday, was really, really neat. And I like the pivot. I from what was said last week about Jacob Fatu potentially being hurt, seems like that way because he was written off the main event. And we actually had Cody Rhodes sub in and put his title on the line in the main event in street clothes. So just a different kind of feel and a different change of pace for what we're used to seeing of this iambic pentameter of what we get from WWE programming a lot of times. This kind of, in a certain way, it shook it up a little bit. And, it made it feel fresh. Like, when's the last time you've seen a world champion put his title on the line and go out impromptu and just fight in street clothes? Obviously, there was a non-finish. Cody got the DQ finish, or, Drew got the DQ win because Cody hit him with the title. So, I mean, and the crowd was not happy about that. But then Cody got the crowd back on his side by ripping up the commentary table and slamming Drew on top of it. So, like, what do we got going on? Like it's kind of it's just a neat program. It's a neat program. There can be a few missteps, I think, overall when it comes to what WWE can do and what they kind of focus on. But man, SmackDown is feels important. And I don't know, maybe I just lean towards it in certain ways because I know my bud Road Dog is behind the scenes. But in the same aspect of it all, there's a lot of I love the Motor City Machine Guns, and I know they were kind of in this heat backup match with the Los Garza after what we saw was like one of the most memorable matches SmackDown has had in this year in Dragunov and Zayn. So they were kind of like the heat backup match. But I mean, there's there's an intention behind what's going on, and I think that's kind of noticeable on SmackDown. Nothing's just kind of thrown out there. You know what I mean? Where it's just like sometimes on Raw you get these filler matches where it feels like filler matches. You feel like, oh, we're getting some variation of New Day versus Penta. That kind of feels like, or Judgment Day versus Bailey and Lyra Valkyria. There's like iterations in that it keeps going. SmackDown just feels a little bit more focused and honed in. Okay, let me talk about this. The reports about AI becoming something of WWE. I will say, from what I've heard, months before this, is that AI was actually a part of WWE programming earlier this year. So this is not a new thing, I don't think. Maybe it's getting more of a focus, or maybe this is kind of it's been reported by the Wrestling Observer. Maybe this is just kind of catching a little traction now. Ultimately, the use of AI I am not overall a fan of AI. If I had my choice, there would be no AI in existence. If I had to choose between having AI and not having AI, I prefer the world did not have AI. Now, is that not to say that it is convenient for certain matters, and things like that? I think yes, obviously it is. Content creators, how people operate, what you're cutting out the fat, where you make things more efficient in certain aspects. I think in like busy work kind of stuff, AI is kind of helpful. But when you're honing in and making it a part of your creative, now that's not just saying WWE, that's just saying in general. Uh, People use AI obviously for images, copy, um, many aspects. I'll admit, once in a great while, not once in a great while, on a pretty certain regular basis, I will use AI just for short little things. If I'm trying to struggle and trying to come up with a catchy YouTube title, YouTube description, that's when I use AI. And then I'll kind of go off that because, hey, if they kind of are familiar with what is catching people's eye, that might be helpful. Now I tweak it and things like that, but ultimately, gosh, if I'm writing an article, no, I won't use AI. Jesus, it's like I think that's malpractice to use AI to write any sort of article and stuff like that. Will I? I do not use it. Very, very seldom. Once in a great while, I will use it for design help. And like, so for instance, Rob Van Dam and we talked about this fan called Dreads. I had no picture of what Dreads look like. I had no idea what Dreads looked like. So what I did, I went to AI and I typed in stoner white guy with the dreads in ECW South Philly in the 90s or something like that. And then it gave me an image that I was like, I will use that. So if I cannot actually make an image that and that's to that's when I used it. But ultimately, I don't think, if I had to venture a guess, I don't think this will stick around. I mean, I think it's maybe part of the process for sure. Like, it's like almost anything, you almost use it for brainstorming ideas and then you see what goes on. I mean, I can't imagine if this does end up being something that it'll last long because you can implement and put information to an AI system and it gives you feedback and it's like kind of it's very creepy and how scary sometimes good it is or how conversational it can be. But I think when it boils down to the brass tacks, you're not getting an experienced voice coming out of it that has been in the business for several years and maybe have seen generations come and go. I'm just using Road Dogg as an example. You have somebody like Road Dogg who has roots in the South wrestling of Bullet Bog Armstrong and that whole area and era of wrestling. And then you also have him somebody that has been and survived and flourished in the sports entertainment slash attitude era. So he has all this knowledge of what is successful in pro wrestling, what works, what doesn't, what is entertaining. That is invaluable to have. So, um, like, is it frustrating, depressing? Yeah, I think it is. Like, AI is just all over the place. It's all over the place. And it's certainly has changed how I do things in my career. Bad, mostly bad, partially good. Uh, I've seen this whole wrestling media landscape change greatly because of things like AI and how people consume media on top of it too. My journalism degree is basically dead. And that's disappointing. All the years that I taught myself Adobe Photoshop and the Adobe Creative Suite, I literally taught myself Photoshop when I was a freshman in college and just never took a class, never just learned just doing it. All that effort and time where something can be conjured up in snap of a couple fingers in a couple minutes is a bummer. So, yeah, do I think ultimately, yeah, AI is going to be around, but hopefully there'll be a thing where it plateaus and we understand that we can't let this thing take over our lives. I just even get annoyed by when I see people just lazily use AI just for fun memes and graphics. I just think stupid. I'm not giving credit to that. Also, the wrestling entrances thing, that AI video, I think it's called Soro or whatever, that has been doing those Bob Ross and wrestling entrances things. Ugh, disgusting, creepy, weird. I do not like it. All right. Um, not Dre. Devin says he hates the AI YouTube ads. I hate. Yeah, I do too. That's a great point. I do too. Um, let's take a look at what some people. Uh. Oh, okay. Here we go. We got some interesting takes on this. Wrestling Audit says if WWE goes full bore with AI writing, they will sorely lack the creative department because from what I'm seeing, AI is nothing but a mirror generator and it pulls from the logic it's given. Um, Devin says, I like the use of AI. There's storylines and things that we won't even think of that AI will give, but it needs to be treated like Russo with an overlooking filter. See some pretty fair takes in here, I think those are all good points. I don't like AI. If I could exist in a world without AI, 100% I would do it. But there is value in it, sadly. Wrestling that says, dude, we would crush it. I'm fully confident. Plus, I'm thick skin acting out day of mine shut down. I wonder what they're talking about here. Oh, we should write these storylines. So Jayon says. Okay, let's see. Jeff Hanger says WWE has always been ahead of the curve in new technology media. Yeah, PvP, streaming, and social media. That is no joke. They have been. You think about it, Vince McMahon. You think about all these streaming platforms that all these uh, businesses and sports leagues and everything. Who was the first to do it? WWE. WWE Network was awesome. Really awesome. I would not be hooked on World Class Championship Wrestling without WWE Network. It was super fun. Hey man, I'm playing with a bounty ball. Razor. Look at this, what my cat's playing with right now. Razor. All right. Yes. So an AI can't deliver a bouncy ball like that either. So yeah. Dre Owens adds they should use AI for the W video game story mode. Right? Try it out on that. I don't know. And see, I mean, from what it sounded like, some of these storylines that AI is developing is very odd and weird. Um, all right. Anything I want to say about SmackDown 2? Let me just talk about that Dragunov and Zayn match. Man, fun. A lot of fun. I think there was like 5 commercial breaks, if I'm not mistaken, for that match. And, just a really, really intense match. Really intense match. And, curious what they're gonna do when it comes to Zayn uh, being distracted by the MFTs and specifically Solo Sokoa. And then on top of it, you have the Wyatt family, the Wyatt Six, kind of mixing it up with them too. So interesting to see maybe where that goes. Um, I think Zayn was a good United States champion, you know, and like I almost feel like it kind of almost cut short. Feels like it got cut short a little bit, but Dragonoff was like at Wrestling Hold it says was looking jacked. He was, and I am gonna say this right here, right now. They didn't do it the job of it when Dragonoff was last active, but if you if any finisher should be protected in today's world of pro wrestling, it's that H bomb. That 100% is my favorite finishing move today. Is that H bomb and the setup that he did with it. I can't remember the move that he did right beforehand. It was called like the Moscow something. I can't remember what it was called. Somebody remembers or knows what move that was that he did right before he did the H bomb to finish off Sami Zayn. That was like definitive stuff. And the fact that Dragunov is that athletic, he's charismatic in kind of like a Cesaro way, and like has that fire. I think there's a lot of potential for Dragunov to be very, very fun. And guess what? I mean, in the grand scheme of it all, who is going to be even more excited when eventually, at some point or another, we're going to see Gunther and Dragunov face off against one another? Like, that's a ways down because they're on different programs. And who knows what routes things are going to take. But man, Dragunov is so cool. Is it called the Moscow Mule or are you just joking? Because I love Moscow Mules. I will say that. Um, yeah, Dragunov looked very, very good. Um, so really, really into that match. I thought it was, yeah, probably the match of the weekend, right? And that counts WrestleDream. I think there was one other takeaway I wanted to talk about in SmackDown. Uh, no, I can't think of what it might have been. Let's talk about WrestleDream. Um, so I only got to watch a few of the matches. So the matches I got to see were Moxley versus Darby and the World Heavyweight Championship match in Samoa Joe and Hangman Adam Page. The rest I did not get to see, but I believe there were two big takeaways from the show, and that was those two matches, I think, and the ending to the pay per view, where we had several uh, talking points take away from. Uh, First off, I will say this: I think Darby is. I love Darby Allin. I think he's fun. He's a lot of fun, and I I understand. Well, I understand his thought process on hey how he takes all these wild risks and is a daredevil in the ring and does these crazy crazy things. So I understand that maybe his thought process, excuse me, thinks that way that I've got to do all this crazy stuff and I love it. That's how he thinks. And so but the fan in me, the and this speaks for Brian Danielson too, is really concerned for his safety. And I always think, Darby, you do not need to do that much. You don't I don't want to see you just be a broken set of bones in a wheelchair in like 20 years. Where like, obviously he's not abusing his body with drugs or anything to that effect, but like, man, that physical pounding that you're just allowing your body to be tossed like Cesaro tosses him, and just beaten from pillar to post, and taking all these huge leaps and dives, and like, when does the buck stop? When does it kind of end? And I think Darby is the only person. I mean, obviously Tony Khan's in charge, so I mean, like he could turn down anything. He could be like, "No, you're not doing that," and anything like that effect. So I mean, the buck does stop ultimately with Tony Khan, but I mean, like, if it's coming from a personal perspective, it's Darby that's got to make that decision and being able to understand he doesn't need to do all this stuff to get over. He's over. I think what I noticed in the amount that I've watched of that match was Darby is like very Jeff Hardy in the fact that he's so good at fighting from underneath and not, and building back up. Like the visual. All right, let's talk about the fish tank thing. Stupid. I thought it was dumb. All right, again, it's just like, how much farther can we go to do this thing? How much crazier can we get? How much shocking can we get? And I know AEW for the sickos. I know, like, it's a different flavor ice cream. However you want to paint it, it's stupid. I think I don't like it. Um I ultimately like revolted, offended, disgusted by it all? No, I'm not. But what does that say about how people view things nowadays too? I think, like, I I don't there is a lot that people this is very much a different thing, from anything we've seen. We've never seen a freaking aquarium get brought into a ring and then filled up with water and then somebody attempted to drown. Now, even when I'm saying that, it's stupid. And it again puts a ceiling on what you're going to ultimately want to do for a fan base, to invite a fan base in and to make it a, casting a wider net. All right. Not this last conference call, but I believe the conference call beforehand, Tony Khan said, "Oh yeah, WWE might be pricing." Now he didn't mention WWE, but he's the question surrounded around WWE pricing out fans, and making that, it for like people that have a lot of money to go to live shows and everything like that, and was asked about being an alternative for people and kids even. And Tony was like, "Yeah, we welcome families and everything like that." Well, how are you going to welcome families if you're doing stuff like that? I understand that's on a pay-per-view, but again, that's connected to your television programming. The reason that people are watching the pay-per-view is because the assumption is they're watching your television programming to get hyped up for your pay-per-view. And you still do violent stuff on your pay-per-view or in your television. When you do very violent stuff on your pay-per-view, it's not setting yourself up to ultimately win. You are, and in the same tune, I know people are talking about this fish tank thing and everything like that, but think about how much that takes away from everything else that you've put on that program, that show that you have like 12 matches on. You don't hear me talk about Jurassic Express and the Young Bucks. You don't hear me talking about Tony Storm versus Chris Statlander. What is the big takeaway? I didn't even talk about Sting returning yet. I'm talking about this fish tank thing. Now, obviously, that's up to me about what I choose to talk about and things like that. But this just feels unnecessary on a program that has a lot of cool elements. I will say, even watching those two matches that I did, it felt really cool. It felt like a pay-per-view. And that's a credit to AEW. And as much times as like Robert and I criticize Dynamite as a week-to-week program, and believe you me, we are critical of that program. I think AEW consistently delivers on pay-per-views, as long as they may be, as sometimes tedious it feels like to watch. There, so you are not doing yourself any favors by dragging a aquarium, filling it up with water, putting it in the ring, and like physically drowning one of your wrestlers in front of a referee. Because number one, you release a suspension of disbelief. Because first off, how in the hell can Darby say I quit if he's being drowned to the referee? Number two, how come the referee, which is I can't remember what's the referee, Bryce Remsburg, how can Bryce Remsburg call the like why isn't he calling the match at this point? There's attempted murder going on right in front of you. Right in front of you. This guy is not having any oxygen. And like the match should be thrown out. If you want to give the match to Moxley, go ahead because he went that far. But like, how come legal authorities aren't getting involved in this? Again, this speaks to like the plastic bag. This speaks to a lot of stuff, and it is counterproductive in getting a younger audience. Maybe this is not for the kids, but Tony said it could be for the kids. It could be for families going to these shows, making them reasonably priced. So, if yeah, it's nuts. All right, it's nuts. I don't think it did any favors. Now, well, let me say this though. At the same time, Sting coming back was awesome. Darby getting the win in the fashion that he did with the baseball bat, the Scorpion Death Lock, the Scorpion Death Drop, then the Scorpion Death Lock was awesome. It cut to the heart of my WCW kid fandom. It was cool. It was very cool. And that's what AEW should be making note of. Not this side thing. Let's push the envelope. Let's see how far we can go and get these things to talk about. I think I have an understanding, or I read a report that one of the producers on this match was actually Dean Malenko. Okay, do you really think Dean Malenko is like, yeah, let's do the fish tank? Yeah. I don't think the Iceman was all for that. I think he understands what the role is, that Moxley maybe probably put this out on the table. Maybe Darby did. I don't know which or who, but like again, this feels like something where it's just like we've seen the spike to the bat, we've seen the fork in the ear, we've seen now this fish tank. It's just too much. It's not needed, and AEW can do better. And they don't need that stuff. They don't. They don't. If AEW could tell me a story 1 week, and they can't. I know it's capable. I know it's possible because I know the talent in the ring and the different creative minds that you have behind the scenes, like a Dean Malenko or a Jerry Lynn, or you name it. Some of those. Wish they had Arn Anderson still. Wish Jake the Snake was still on the horn, or maybe to an extent is. But like, if you could go 1 week without telling any story by not having blood be a factor, by not having some violent gimmicky thing take place, and you just focus on your story, characters, and making a product engaging without all that other stuff. Because where do you go from here after you do this? What's next after this? And you get your very niche fan base to be like wondering what's next for this, it's gonna get to a point where it's just like, oh my god, and it is to several people. So let me see here. I want to take a look at some comments. Okay, here we got a lot of comments. Thanks for everybody for all these great comments here. I appreciate the engagement. Okay. Holy smokes! All right, Joe turned heel. Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a second. Triple E says, I'd be surprised if they brought back the traditional Survivor Series match. They really should do that. I think they should. After this is wrestling all day. After Sting smashed the fish tank with the bat, I figured Darby was going to position Mox for the insertion of glove. Oh gosh, what's sticking out to make him say I quit so he's not stabbed? Yeah, that would have been bad. That would have been bad. Devin says he thinks it was a flat finish. Darby had everything happen to him except he got shot, and he beats Moxley by 2 moves in a sharpshooter with. What the hell? That's what he said. So here, this is the excuse I'll make for them, and I think people can probably buy into it if they choose to or not. But like, since Sting showed up in AEW, he's been an unstoppable force, almost like a supernatural force when it comes to the damage he's taken in the and the moves that he gets executed on. It ultimately finishes people off with. So here's how I would angle this if I were a Tony Khan or anybody, would be like, Darby's learned the Kavorka from Sting. Yeah, like that, the Scorpion Death Drop, that sharp, or the Scorpion Death Lock. Boom, that was all learned from Sting, and it paid off for him. And you can also kind of play into the aspect that Darby gets back up because of Sting. So that would be my excuse, and I would buy into that too as a wrestling fan, more so than I would buy into a fish tank being brought in and trying to drown somebody. Dre Owen says Darby should have went after Renee and forced Mox to say a quick no, because that would have made. If you're really turning him heel, then yeah, okay, I could maybe see that. Make Darby the new face of the Death Riders. That's the next intriguing element of this whole thing, is what is next for the Death Riders? Because Darby, he's still a babyface. Sting is there. He's a babyface. Are you really going to want to align with Claudio or Pac after they helped Moxie that whole time, like drag you around, and like it was Claudio that filled the water tank up? Like that, I would have been more for that. So what is next for the Death Riders? Can we just disperse them, get this over with, everybody go on their singles ways, and there we go? Have Mox go away for a while, then you could later bring him back because he's been besmirched and humiliated. I think that might be the way to go, because you get this. Samoa Joe is better as a heel, and AEW is thin at the top with heels. But since he turned on Page after losing, he has to beat Page, right? No, you don't have to necessarily. I think you add a new ripple in the fact that Joe turned heel. This first match was thought to be turned into a match of respect, and here, no, Joe's bitter and there's an attack on him. Now, I do think that this heel turn creates questions of what is next for the Death Riders, because if you have these two big heel factions, what's the point? What's the point? So I'm hoping that this is an indication that the Death Riders are done, and that the Ops might be a new heel faction that, is a primary focus for Hangman. And I'm okay with this feud potentially. Like, I thought the match was fun. I love the finish, like Joe just stumbling around and getting hit with 3 buckshot lariats to take a former champion down. I thought spoke well of the storyline. We'll see what this develops into. What can they make this intriguing even more so? I think there's potential for it, but I'm obviously skeptical too at the same time. Jeff Henniger says all this plastic bag and drowning might be some weird autoerotic suffocation kink with Darby and Moxley. It's too much. It's too much. Like you're taking me out of it when you're, just like taking oxygen away from somebody in such an extreme fashion that, when we're all kids, there was PSAs about plastic bags and, that kind of thing. Which also makes me bring up this. Devin Dowling, Amanda Huber, and some lady, that's Sarah Stock, got into it on X over mom stopping kids from watching this stuff. And then Wrestling Old Days says Sarah Stock. So what was her name in TNA? I can't remember what her name was, TNA, but is getting bombed off for saying exactly this. And I agree with you and her on this wholeheartedly. So yeah, I understand it's a pay-per-view that's on at late at night and you have to pay to see it, and that it's AEW's brand has been for this 18 to 35 or whatever it is demographic. And so you are for the sickos, and that's what you've been. But Tony, like I just said, Tony mentioned how AEW can be welcoming to families, to bring the kids, to bring. This is a takeaway of no, it's not. I think it's not good for your product ultimately in the grand scheme of it all. Like, do you see what AEW did? It'd be one thing if it was like a really underground kind of thing and you're trying to create some buzz. Even that's kind of dumb, because ECW set the precedent for that early on. So the edginess, violent aspect of it all was all done. We've seen it all. So, what can you do differently to make your product feel unique, but still attract a huge audience? You're removing yourself from the equation of being as big as WWE possibly can because of this type of stuff. There, you are putting a ceiling, you're putting a cap on how high your product can get by having a fish tank in the ring and drowning somebody in it. You are not The Sopranos. You are not Breaking Bad. You are not trying to think of other very violent shows. You're not The Wire. I'm going dated, but whatever. It's just think about this. The potential for wrestling. You have this new opportunity to be something different from WWE, not just from a creative standpoint, but from what you're selling. Who can go? WWE is pricing people out of going to these live events right now, and their game plan is much different. So AEW, they're playing more intimate venues. The ticket prices can be lower. Tony is not beholden to selling tickets, everything like that. He's a billionaire, so he's got money on hand to do whatever he wants. But if you want to build your company to make it bigger and better, you got to get rid of this stupid crap. Devin Down says the pay-per-view started with FTR versus Speedball and his partner's match not finishing on the pre-show, so the fireworks and stuff went off mid-match. Yeah, I saw that. Kind of funny, kind of cool though in a way too. Kind of cool though. Let's see. Siba 2227 says, I think AW tries to harken back to the 90s and 80s aesthetic of WWE and include a lot of the old style antics of the era. I'm assuming you mean more so the Attitude Era stuff. And I don't think that's a good note to hit, to be honest, right now. I just don't. I think that moment has come and gone when it comes to the violence and certain aspects like that, where it's like the shock value. So, like, there's different ways to tackle this thing, and AEW is not tackling properly, I think, when it comes down to it. So I didn't watch the Hurt Business match. I saw the results. Whatever. It just felt like an unneeded match because Hurt Syndicate wins, and Gates of Agony once again look like losers, and Ricochet is associated with losers. What makes oh my god, why am I forgetting? Why am I blanking on their name? They got a cool faction name. What makes Gates of Agony and Ricochet any different from the Don Callis family at this point? We're used to the majority of them losing, and they're just there. So I don't know. It felt pointless. It felt like a pointless match. Tag match was awesome. World Tag Team Title match. Brodito, man, what chemistry him. That's another match I did catch a good deal of with Brodito and Takeshita and Okada. So I like that. I like what they're doing with all that. Brodito is one of those Kane RVD tag teams, and I'm all for that kind of thing. So let's see. Yeah. Devin Delling says, so they lost pet stores, pizza places, arcades, video games, and Ric Flair. Yeah. Interesting. Dre Owen says, if I'm TK, knowing WWE is pricing out families, I'd start doing family packages, 4 tickets for $100, certain sections, capitalize on those being priced out. 100%, Dre. And you know what? I would highly consider completely, I know they've done this several times, but completely changing your aesthetic, the look and feel of your show. It's got like a little Nitro guest kind of vibe still, but guess what? I would make bright colors, simple logos, classic looking stuff, and present it almost. I would I'd watch some of those NWA Power shows, and I understand those are studio shows, but like, since NWA didn't capitalize on NWA Power in the feel in that moment in time, NWA Power was awesome when it first started off. It was fantastic. You had Nick Aldis, you had Eddie Kingston, you had Ricky Starks, you had Eli Drake. Remember that guy? You had my goodness, Trevor Murdoch. You had Homicide, James Storm. I know I'm missing people, but that's the look AEW should go for. What's old is new again, and if NWA didn't make the most of that, why not AEW? And then, hey, you want to have a hard hitting, kind of violent sort of match going on? Uh, you don't need shards of glass. You don't need fish tanks. You don't need pizza cutters. You don't need forks. You don't need anything to that effect. But you have a hard hitting, kind of violent match. Then there's a Darby Allin there for you. There's a Moxley there for you at some point or another. But I would say I would pick and choose moments that are effective, but you fuel this violence based off of story and less off of action. So that's my thoughts. I guess that's going to do it for today. Raw's tonight. I don't even know what's on the card for Raw, but you know what? I will just look tomorrow and we'll talk about it. It should be a fun show, I'm sure. I'm intrigued to see what goes on with the Breakers or the Bronze and where the follow-up that is. I'm very intrigued. I hope CM Punk is a big implementation on the show. Are they still in Japan? I don't know. Are they back? Whatever. But, make it a cool follow-up. I'm interested to see what goes on. I'm interested to see what Heyman has to say. I'm sure we're going to hear Heyman speak. I'm sure we are. So, but congrats to Sami Zayn and Ilya Dragunov on what was an awesome match for the week. Love Cody Rhodes' look with the long jacket and stuff like that. I think that's a look he should kind of keep. I like it. Any other takeaways? Happy birthday to my favorite of all time, Scott Hall. I love Scott Hall. As a matter of fact, I did a birthday celebration for Bruno Sammartino. Was it 2 weeks ago? I might do a live birthday celebration for Scott Hall today as well, and just share my thoughts, my fandom, everything, what I love about Scott Hall tonight. Let's do that, as a matter of fact. How about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, brassringmedia.com. Celebrate Scott Hall with me. If you have stories or your favorite moments of Scott Hall, share them with me in the comments. If you want to write me an email, go to dpdangelo@gmail.com. That's D as in Dominic, P as in Paul, D'Angelo, my last name, @gmail.com. Send me something. I'll read it on the air. Yeah. So let's talk a little Scott Hall tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, yes, thank you, Wrestling Wholehead, for making a mention of this. Rest in peace to Sir Mo from Men on a Mission. Yeah, I know he was going through some health situations, and it looked like things were, he was powering through some of it, but ultimately he passed away. So rest in peace to Mo of Men on a Mission. Thank you for your contributions to wrestling. God bless you, and see you on the other side. So thank you all for tuning in. If you want to join me again, go to brassringmedia.com tonight. We'll celebrate some Scott Hall, Chico, and maybe I'll show some cool stuff I have, and I'll share some stories. I met Scott several times, and he's my all-time favorite. So stories to be told tonight. All right. See you next time here on Rumor and Innuendo. Best of luck in your future endeavors, and usa machismo, Chico.